I was working as an on-call gardener, which meant my schedule could be unpredictable, but it gave me the flexibility to be home often. My wife, a highly talented rehabilitation therapist, specialized in working with athletes, some of whom were quite famous. I always admired how dedicated she was to her career. Her job could be intense, often requiring her to spend long hours with clients to help them recover from injuries or the strains of intense training. One day, I noticed something different about her. She didn't seem like her usual self. There was a shift in her demeanor, subtle but unmistakable. She seemed distracted, distant even, as if something was weighing on her. At first, I chalked it up to her job, assuming she was just exhausted from a particularly tough week. It wasn't uncommon for her to come home drained after a long day. But this felt different. There was something off that I couldn't quite put my finger on. Still, I didn't push it. We'd been together long enough to know that sometimes work stress could seep into our personal lives, and I didn't want to add to her burden. So, I told myself not to worry, to give her space and time to unwind. After all, our relationship was built on trust, and there was no reason to think anything was wrong. Or so I thought. Over the next few days, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. I noticed small changes in her behavior. She was more guarded with her phone, quickly putting it away when I entered the room. She seemed to be texting more often, and at odd hours too, but whenever I asked who she was messaging, she would casually say it was just work. But it didn't sit right with me. The way she smiled at her screen, the quick glances she gave me after a message came through, it all made me uneasy. One evening, as we sat down for dinner, the tension was palpable. She seemed even more withdrawn, barely making eye contact, and when I asked how her day had been, her response was unusually short. It was fine, just the usual, she said, not offering any details, which wasn't like her at all. Normally, she would tell me about the athletes she worked with, the progress they were making, and the challenges she faced. But tonight, she barely touched her food and kept glancing at her phone, as if waiting for something. I knew I had to say something, but I didn't want to come across as paranoid or accusatory. So, I gently asked, "Is everything okay? You've seemed a bit distant lately." She looked up, startled, almost as if she hadn't expected me to notice. "Yeah, I'm fine," she replied quickly, too quickly. "Just tired, I guess. Work's been intense." I nodded, trying to take her words at face value, but the gnawing feeling in my gut wouldn't go away. Something was off, and no amount of reassurance seemed to ease the doubt that had started to grow inside me. One evening, I was in the kitchen, chopping vegetables for dinner, when I heard the sound of tires crunching on the gravel driveway. Glancing out the window, I saw a sleek black Mercedes pull up. The car looked expensive, far more luxurious than the usual clients my wife worked with. My curiosity piqued, and I walked to the front door just as my wife stepped out of the car. The driver, a tall man in a tailored suit, gave her a polite nod before driving off into the night. She looked different tonight, like something had changed. She had this air of confidence about her that didn't match the tired, stressed woman I had been seeing the last few weeks. In her arms, she was carrying a large, framed painting wrapped carefully in protective cloth. The way she held it, as if it was something precious, only deepened the mystery. "Hey," I said, stepping outside to greet her. "What's with the fancy ride? And what's that?" She smiled, but it wasn't her usual warm smile, it was almost nervous, as if she was waiting for my reaction. "Oh, this," she gestured to the painting as she walked past me into the house. "It's a gift from one of my clients. He's an athlete, you know, and I've been helping him with his rehab before a major competition. He was so grateful for the progress we've made that he gave me this as a thank you." I followed her into the living room, where she carefully placed the painting on the floor against the wall. I could see the excitement in her eyes as she began to unwrap it, revealing the bold, vibrant strokes of a famous artist, one whose name I immediately recognized. My stomach tightened as I realized just how valuable the piece was. This wasn't just some token of appreciation, this painting was worth a small fortune. "Wow," I murmured, struggling to hide my disbelief. That's incredible. Are you sure a client just gave you this? She nodded, her fingers still lingering on the frame as if she couldn't believe it herself. Yeah, isn't it amazing? He's really wealthy, obviously, and he said this was a small token of his appreciation. I helped him get back on track just in time for his competition, and apparently, this was his way of thanking me. I stood there, trying to process it all. The story seemed innocent enough on the surface, but something didn't sit right with me. Who gives a painting worth that much money as a thank you gift? And why hadn't she mentioned this client before? I'd heard stories of the athletes she worked with, but never anyone who seemed like they could, or would, part with something so valuable on a whim. That's generous, I said, choosing my words carefully. But don't you think that's a bit much for just helping someone recover from an injury? I mean, this isn't exactly a bottle of wine or a box of chocolates. She looked at me, her expression tightening ever so slightly, like she was trying to keep her cool. Well, Jack, these athletes, they're used to living in a different world. It's nothing to them. Besides, I put in a lot of work with him. Restoring his body to full form before such a big competition, it's no small feat. There was a firmness in her voice, a subtle defensiveness that made me feel like I was pushing too hard. But I couldn't ignore the unease creeping up inside me. Something about this whole situation felt off, like pieces of a puzzle that didn't quite fit together. I wanted to believe her, to trust that this was just a kind gesture from a grateful client. But that black Mercedes, the extravagant gift, the way she seemed almost too rehearsed in her explanation, it all gnawed at me. I nodded slowly, forcing a smile. Yeah, I guess that makes sense. But in the back of my mind, doubt had already taken root. I watched her as she carefully placed the painting in the corner of the room, her back to me now. She looked different, more distant, more closed off, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something bigger was going on. That night, after dinner, as she disappeared upstairs to shower, I found myself standing in front of the painting, studying it. It was beautiful, no doubt about that. But I couldn't help wondering what it really symbolized. Was it just a gift? Or was it something more? As I stood there, a chilling thought crossed my mind. What if this wasn't just about work? What if there was something, or someone, else behind this sudden windfall? The questions swirled in my head, but I pushed them aside. I didn't want to jump to conclusions. Not yet, at least. But the seed of doubt had been planted, and no matter how much I tried to ignore it, I couldn't shake the feeling that my wife was hiding something from me. The days following the arrival of the painting were strange. I couldn't stop thinking about it, about how casually she had brushed off my concerns. The black Mercedes, the athlete, the gift, it all lingered in my mind like an unresolved puzzle. Every time I walked past the painting in the living room, it felt like it was staring at me, a constant reminder that something wasn't right. My wife seemed unaffected by the entire situation, going about her days as if nothing had changed. She was busy with her clients, often working late into the evening, and the distance between us only seemed to grow. I tried to convince myself that I was overreacting, that it was just a generous gift, but no matter how hard I tried, the doubt wouldn't go away. A few days later, I came home from work to find her sitting in the living room, carefully unwrapping something on the coffee table. At first, I thought it was another piece of art, but as I got closer, I realized it was a box, an elegant, polished wooden box with intricate designs carved into the surface. It looked expensive, almost antique. My stomach twisted as I approached. "Hey, what's that?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. She glanced up at me, her expression bright, as if nothing was out of the ordinary. "Oh, this? It's another gift from a client." She said it so casually, as if she was bringing home a bouquet of flowers, not an item that screamed wealth and extravagance. "He wanted to thank me for all the work I've done with him, so he gave me this. Isn't it beautiful?" I looked at the box more closely, noticing the intricate gold inlay in the way it seemed to catch the light. It was clear this was no ordinary gift. My pulse quickened. I could feel the unease bubbling up inside me again, stronger this time. A gift? Again? I said, trying to hide the edge in my voice. That's a little much, don't you think? She shrugged, still unwrapping it, not even looking at me. He's just really appreciative. He's been making amazing progress, and he said he wanted to show his gratitude. This is how people in their world operate, Jack. It's not a big deal. But it was a big deal. It was starting to feel like everything was spinning out of control. First the painting, now this extravagant box. The gifts were becoming too frequent, too expensive, and I couldn't ignore the growing knot of jealousy tightening in my chest. Look, I said, my voice more firm now, I get that your clients are grateful, but this is the second expensive gift in a week. Don't you think it's a little strange? She finally looked up, her expression unreadable, like she didn't understand why I was making such a fuss. Why are you being like this? It's just a gift, Jack. You're overthinking it. Am I? I shot back, unable to keep the frustration out of my voice. First, it's a painting worth God knows how much, and now this? It's not normal, okay? People don't just give away stuff like this unless. Unless what? She interrupted, her tone sharp now. Unless what, Jack? I hesitated, the words stuck in my throat. Unless they want something more. Unless there's something going on that you're not telling me. But I didn't say any of that. I couldn't. I was afraid of what her reaction might be. Instead, I just shook my head, the frustration building into something darker, something I couldn't control. I don't know, I muttered, running a hand through my hair. It just feels off. She stood up then, crossing her arms, a defiant look in her eyes. I think you're being paranoid. These are gifts, nothing more. My clients appreciate my work, and this is how they show it. You know how hard I've been working with them. Can't you just accept that? I wanted to believe her. I wanted to let it go, but I couldn't. The doubt, the jealousy, it was all starting to consume me. I kept picturing her with these clients, the black Mercedes pulling up to our house, the expensive gifts. What else was happening behind the scenes? Who were these people, really? And why was she so insistent that everything was fine? That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing with thoughts I didn't want to have. Was there someone else? Was she hiding something from me? The more I thought about it, the more I realized how little I knew about her world, about the clients she worked with, the time she spent away from home. I had always trusted her, never questioned where she was or who she was with. But now, everything felt different. My imagination ran wild, feeding on the uncertainty, and no matter how hard I tried to push it down, the jealousy surged back stronger each time. The next morning, she left early for another session with one of her clients. As I stood in the doorway, watching her drive away, that black Mercedes flashed in my mind again, the gifts, the late nights, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was happening right under my nose. Something I couldn't control. I knew I couldn't go on like this. I had to get answers, had to find out what was really going on. My gut was screaming at me that there was more to this than just gratitude from a few wealthy clients. I didn't want to be the jealous husband, but I was. And it was eating me alive. That night, I was restless. Sleep didn't come easy, and when it finally did, I found myself trapped in the middle of a vivid nightmare. In the dream, my wife was with another man, laughing and whispering in his ear, her body close to his in ways that twisted my insides. I couldn't move, couldn't stop it. The pain in the dream was so real that it woke me up with a start. My heart was pounding, the sheets drenched in sweat. I lay there for a moment, staring up at the ceiling, trying to shake the images from my head. But the dream felt too real, too close to what I had been fearing for weeks now. The jealousy, the doubt, it had all crept into my subconscious, fueling my worst nightmares. I rubbed my face, trying to calm down, but I could feel the anxiety gnawing at me. Deciding I needed to clear my head, I slipped out of bed as quietly as I could and headed for the bathroom. Maybe some cold water would help snap me out of this spiral. I just needed to wake up, to remind myself that it was only a dream, that I was being paranoid. But as I approached the bathroom door, I noticed a soft glow of light coming from inside. The door was cracked open just a little, enough for a thin beam of light to spill out into the dark hallway. My brow furrowed. I wasn't sure why, but something about it made my heart beat faster. I pushed the door open gently, careful not to make too much noise. And then I saw her. My wife was standing in front of the bathroom mirror, half naked, with her phone in her hands. The sight of her startled me, but what shocked me even more was the expression on her face. Her eyes were focused on the screen, her lips slightly parted, as if she was lost in whatever, or whoever, was on the other end of that video call. She touched her lips lightly with her fingers, her expression soft, intimate. I froze. My chest tightened as I tried to comprehend what I was seeing. The nightmare I had just woken from seemed to bleed into reality, and for a moment, I thought I might still be dreaming. But I wasn't. This was real. Too real. I took a step forward, and my movement must have caught her attention because she suddenly looked up at me in the mirror, her eyes wide with shock. "Jack," she stammered, fumbling with the phone, trying to turn it off or hide it, but it was too late. Without thinking, I lunged forward and tore the phone from her hands. My heart was pounding so hard I could barely hear anything over the rush of blood in my ears. I glanced down at the screen, my hands shaking as I held the phone. On the screen was a man, some guy I didn't recognize, staring back at me. His face froze in a look of surprise, his expression quickly shifting to panic. I could feel the rage bubbling up inside me, hot and uncontrollable. "What the hell is this?" I spat, my voice low but trembling with fury. She didn't answer right away. She just stood there, half naked, her arms wrapping around herself, her face pale and her eyes wide with fear. I waited for her to say something, anything, but all she did was shake her head, tears starting to well up in her eyes. "Jack, she began, her voice barely a whisper, but I didn't want to hear it. I couldn't. The image of her, standing there, her fingers brushing her lips, the man on the other side of that screen, what they were doing, what they were saying, it all crashed down on me like a wave, suffocating me. "You've got to be kidding me," I muttered, my hand clutching the phone so tightly I thought I might crush it. "You're talking to him? In the middle of the night? In our house?" She opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. The guilt in her eyes was unmistakable, and it made me sick to my stomach. I couldn't believe this was happening. The jealousy that had been simmering inside me for weeks now erupted, uncontrollable. "What the hell were you doing?" I demanded, louder this time. I couldn't stop myself, the anger boiling over. "You were just talking? That's what you call this?" She stepped toward me, her hand reaching out as if to calm me down, but I stepped back, keeping the distance between us. "Jack, it's not what it looks like," she said, her voice trembling. "Please, just let me explain." "Not what it looks like?" I scoffed, my voice dripping with disbelief. "You were standing there, practically naked, touching yourself while talking to some guy on a video call in the middle of the night. How am I supposed to see this as anything other than exactly what it is?" I could see her struggling to find the right words, but nothing she could say would fix this. Nothing could erase what I had just seen. The image of her in front of the mirror, that man's face on the screen, it was burned into my mind. She finally spoke, her voice small and desperate. "It was just a mistake. I wasn't thinking. It didn't mean anything, Jack. Please, you have to believe me." I laughed bitterly, shaking my head. "A mistake? A mistake is knocking over a glass of water, not sneaking around behind my back, doing this." She looked away, tears spilling down her cheeks, but it didn't matter. The damage was done. My trust in her, the foundation of our marriage, it had all shattered in that one moment. I couldn't stand to be in the same room with her. I turned on my heel, tossing the phone onto the bathroom counter as I stormed out of the room, leaving her standing there, half naked and crying. As I made my way back to the bedroom, my mind was spinning. My wife, had been sneaking around, hiding things from me, and I had been too blind to see it. All the doubts, the jealousy, the unease I'd been feeling, it had all been justified. I slammed the bedroom door behind me, the sound echoing through the house. Everything had just changed. There was no going back now. I stood in the bedroom, staring at the wall, my mind racing. The silence between us was thick, broken only by the faint sound of my wife's sobs coming from the bathroom. I couldn't think straight. My thoughts were clouded with anger, betrayal, and confusion. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, but what would it change? The trust we'd built over the years had been shattered in an instant, and I wasn't sure how to piece it back together. A few moments later, I heard the soft shuffle of footsteps behind me. She had followed me into the bedroom, her eyes red and swollen from crying, her body now wrapped in a robe. I turned to face her, and she stood there, hesitating, as if searching for the right words. I could feel the anger still boiling inside me, but I kept my mouth shut, waiting for her to explain herself. "Jack, please," she whispered, stepping closer, her voice fragile but insistent. "I swear, it's not as bad as it looks." I glared at her, my fists clenched. "Not as bad as it looks?" I snapped. "You were standing in the bathroom, half naked, talking to some guy on a video call. How the hell is that not as bad as it looks?" She wiped her tears, taking a deep breath. "I know it seems terrible," she began, her words coming faster now, like she was trying to get ahead of my fury. "But it's not what you think. I wasn't doing anything wrong. I wasn't cheating." I scoffed, turning away from her. "Then what the hell do you call it?" She stepped forward, her voice shaking. "Jack, just listen to me for a second. I've been showing myself to some of these clients, on camera. It's nothing more than that. I promise you, it's all about appearances, about getting them to feel good and, in return, they've been giving me these big gifts." My stomach churned. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Big gifts?" I muttered. "Is that what this is all about? You're selling yourself to get gifts from these guys?" "It's not like that," she insisted, her voice rising in desperation. "They're just clients, Jack. Athletes, businessmen. It's a world you don't understand. This is normal for them. They're grateful for what I do for them, for helping them with their recovery. Showing a little skin, being a little flirty, it's part of it. And they reward me for it, Jack. They give me gifts, money, things that could change our lives." I stared at her, utterly dumbfounded. "So what? You think I'm supposed to be okay with this? With you showing yourself off to other men, letting them fantasize about you, in exchange for money and gifts?" She swallowed hard, her eyes pleading. "Jack, listen to me. We're talking about a lot of money. You've seen the gifts they've given me already. The painting, the box, and there's more, so much more. These men, they have more money than they know what to do with. They just want to feel good, to feel appreciated. That's all it is. And we could have everything we ever wanted, more than we ever dreamed of." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My wife, the woman I thought I knew, was standing in front of me, telling me that flaunting herself for wealthy men was some sort of opportunity. My head was spinning, and I couldn't grasp how she could think this was okay. I took a step closer to her, my voice cold. "You think money makes this okay? You think I'm going to stand by while you do this, for gifts, for money?" I could feel my pulse racing, the betrayal settling deep in my bones. "How long has this been going on? How many of these clients have you been parading yourself in front of?" She hesitated, and for a brief moment, I thought I saw a flicker of guilt in her eyes. But she quickly pressed on. "It doesn't matter how long, Jack. What matters is that it's harmless. I've never touched any of them. It's just video calls, that's all. They're grateful for my help, and I give them something small in return. And we get rewarded for it. You call that small?" I spat, pointing back toward the bathroom. I walked in on you, half naked, whispering to some guy, touching your lips, that asterisk is what you call harmless? Jesus, how can you even think like this? Her face crumpled, and she stepped forward, her hand reaching for mine, but I pulled back, keeping the distance between us. Jack, I'm trying to do this for us, she said softly. Think about what we could have. We could pay off the house, take vacations, never have to worry about money again. These clients, they have so much to give, and all I'm doing is making them feel good about themselves. You have to understand, it's not cheating. I stared at her, stunned by her words. It's not cheating? I repeated, my voice dripping with disbelief. You've been sneaking around, showing yourself to other men, and you think that's not cheating? She opened her mouth to speak, but I couldn't let her finish. The rage that had been simmering inside me for weeks finally boiled over. This isn't about money, or gifts, or anything else. You've been hiding this from me, lying to me. Don't stand there and act like this is okay because it benefits us. Nothing justifies what you've been doing. Tears welled up in her eyes again, but I didn't care. I couldn't. The betrayal was too deep, too raw. She had crossed a line I never thought she would, and no amount of money or gifts could make that right. I can't believe you, I said, my voice hoarse. You've turned us into this? You've destroyed everything we've built just for what? A little extra money? Fancy gifts? She sobbed softly, her body trembling, but I couldn't bring myself to feel sorry for her. She had done this. She had made this choice. And no matter how much she cried or how many excuses she gave, it wouldn't change the fact that our marriage, our life, had been tainted by her lies. I'm done, I said quietly, my voice hollow. I can't do this anymore. Her eyes widened, panic flooding her face. Jack, no. Please, don't. But I was already moving. I grabbed my jacket from the chair and headed for the door, my mind made up. The house, the money, the gifts, none of it mattered anymore. She had betrayed me, and I couldn't stay in a marriage built on lies. As I stepped outside into the cold night air, I could still hear her calling after me, but her voice felt distant, fading into the background. I didn't know where I was going, or what the future held, but I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't go back. Not now. Not ever. The next few days were a blur of anger, confusion, and sleepless nights. I couldn't stop thinking about what my wife had said, that she had been showing herself off to wealthy clients, flaunting her body in exchange for expensive gifts. Her calm explanation, the way she tried to justify it with promises of wealth and security, made my blood boil. I couldn't escape the images in my mind, the way she had touched her lips, whispering sweet nothings to some faceless man over a video call, while I had been sleeping just a few feet away. The betrayal was suffocating. I couldn't stay in the house, not with her, not after what I had seen and heard. I spent most of my time driving aimlessly through the city, trying to clear my head, but nothing worked. The rage followed me everywhere, gnawing at me like an open wound. I needed to do something, anything, to make sense of this nightmare. That's when I decided to call my old friend, Brian. He was a tech wizard, someone I had known for years. We'd worked together on a few projects, and I knew he had the skills to dig up information, the kind of stuff most people wouldn't be able to find. If anyone could help me track down the man in the black Mercedes, the one who had been gifting my wife lavish presents in exchange for her body, it was him. Brian, I said when he answered the phone, my voice tense, I need your help. There's someone I need to find. He didn't ask too many questions. He never did. I gave him a description of the car, told him what little I knew about the man, and within a few hours, Brian had done it. He sent me a message with the guy's name, a few pictures, and his home address. The man in the black Mercedes was no mystery anymore. He was real, and now I had a face to match the anger that had been burning inside me. That evening, I found myself parked a few blocks away from his house, watching as the black Mercedes sat in the driveway like a trophy. The sleek, expensive car gleamed under the streetlights, taunting me. My hands clenched around the steering wheel as I stared at it, imagining everything this man had done, everything he had said to my wife. My pulse raced, and the rage bubbled up again, uncontrollable. Without thinking, I grabbed the brick I had brought with me. It was heavy in my hand, a solid, cold weight that matched the fury in my chest. I got out of the car, my mind a blur of anger and revenge. I couldn't see straight, couldn't think beyond the need to lash out, to make this man pay for what he had done. In one swift motion, I hurled the brick at the car. The sound of shattering glass filled the air, the windshield cracking in a spiderweb pattern as the brick hit its mark. I stood there, breathing hard, my chest heaving with the force of my anger. The car alarm went off, blaring into the night, but I didn't care. I didn't stick around to see the aftermath. I just turned and walked away, the sound of the alarm fading behind me as I made my way back to my car. I drove home in silence, my hands still shaking from the adrenaline. I knew what I had done was reckless, but I didn't care. For a brief moment, it felt good, like I had taken back some control, even if it was just by destroying a piece of his world. When I got home, the house was quiet. My wife was sitting on the couch, staring at the floor, her face pale and drawn. She looked up when I entered, her eyes red from crying, but I didn't feel any sympathy for her. Not after everything. I walked past her without a word, heading for the bedroom. I opened the drawer where we kept some emergency cash, grabbed a wad of bills, about $1,000, and returned to the living room. She watched me, confused, as I stood in front of her, holding the money in my hand. "Here," I said, my voice cold and emotionless as I threw the cash onto the coffee table. $1,000. Now come on, show me what you can do." Her eyes widened, and she stared at the money, then back at me, her face a mixture of shock and horror. "What are you talking about?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "You heard me," I said, stepping closer. "Show me what you did for that athlete over the video call. Come on, give me a performance. You seem to be good at it." Her face went pale, and she shook her head, tears filling her eyes again. "Jack, please. Don't, Jack, please, me," I snapped, my voice rising with anger. "You wanted to pose for money, right? Well, here's your chance. I'm paying you now. Isn't this what you wanted? Isn't this why you've been sneaking around, showing yourself off for gifts? Let's see it. Let's see what you've been hiding from me." She broke down then, sobbing uncontrollably, her body shaking as she covered her face with her hands. I stood there, unmoved, the cold weight of betrayal sitting heavily on my chest. I had loved this woman, trusted her, and she had thrown it all away for some extra money, for gifts, for attention from other men. I turned and walked away, leaving her there, broken and crying. As I stepped outside into the night, I realized that the woman I had once known, the woman I had built a life with, was gone. Whatever remained between us was shattered beyond repair. I didn't look back.